The Green Bay Packers can't lose to the Carolina Panthers, right? Of course they can. We've seen them the last 2 weeks play down and even below the level of opponents that seem like, on talent at least, they're beneath Green Bay. Any team can lose any week. So what do the Packers have to do to avoid getting upset on Christmas Eve? Julian Council from Locked On Panthers joins me for a crossover Thursday. Let's do it.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You were Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. We start and end our show today with Julian Council from Locked On Panthers, a crossover Thursday. The latest updates on the injuries, mostly in, at least from the important ones, Darnell Savage still hurt. We'll see where that goes. A.J. Dillon tried to practice on Wednesday. Jair Alexander practiced a little on Wednesday. Devondre Campbell sat, being called a neck injury. He vented his frustration on Twitter with playing through injuries. Matt LaFleur said after the fact he understood. And they gave him a day, basically, to just rest and chill and say, hey, we hear you. We understand you're frustrated. Just rest. He's not the only player on this defense that's frustrated. So they got to figure this out, and we'll talk about that with Julian.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers and Locked On Packers podcast. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can check me out, Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers, and him, Peter Bukowski, the host of Locked On Packers. Talk about the Panthers and Packers, respectively, every Monday through Friday. Your team every day is our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you follow your favorite podcast. Free and available everywhere. And be sure to check me out, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, and him, Peter Bukowski, on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski. Today's Locked On Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all in lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100 on Sunday afternoon, Christmas Eve. The 2-12 Carolina Panthers will face off against the 6-8 Green Bay Packers at Bank of America Stadium in Uptown Charlotte. Peter, how excited are you for this holiday affair?
Man, you deserve a Christmas bonus for selling this game that much. I really appreciate it. No, the thing that is fun, if you're going to point to something as just a casual NFL fan, and I don't think we have a ton of those as listeners, like if you're a Locked On Podcast Network listener, you're probably pretty hardcore, and that's awesome. But Bryce Young and Jordan Love is a pretty cool story. These two guys who are trying to make their way in the NFL. I think that Bryce Young coming into the year was going to have a much longer leash than Jordan Love. And thank goodness for that for him. And Jordan Love was probably going to have a much shorter leash, and he's performed well in that role. But, he's a 2020 draft class, and Bryce Young is 2023. So there's that big difference there. And I think we've seen over the course of the season where that's come into play. But also, and this is something that I'm so excited to talk to you about, Julian, is the difference in team building for these two teams and the approaches that they've taken. I'll get to that in a second. But post Frank Reich and the changes that have made here, like, this has been a pretty game Panthers team over the last couple of weeks. What has been the biggest difference that you've seen there? Like, that has to be one of the storylines in Charlotte right now. Yeah.
Yes and no. It's good that they finally were able to get a win again on Sunday, in that really just messy, rain-soaked affair against the Falcons. It was
in front of dozens and dozens of fans.
Yes, well, it was the third rainiest game in franchise history, and the number one rainiest game occurred back in 2013 when the Panthers beat the Saints. The year the Panthers went 12-4, and that was a sellout crowd, and one of the loudest that stadium's ever been. So I do not begrudge anyone who did not want to sit out in 40-degree weather watching what was then a 1-12 football team. And the prices were like $4, but knowing how Ticketmaster likes to screw us over is probably really a $300 ticket after fees. So I don't blame anybody. But yeah, they've been competitive.
That's why Game Time, by the way. That's why go use Game Time. You'll see the full price up front.
Oh, absolutely. And I use Game Time for a bit I'm going to on Wednesday night, or I went to on Wednesday night. So I appreciate our partners there. But as far as like their competitiveness, of course, you get the win against Atlanta. How good are the Falcons? They're not that great. Have a negative point differential at this point in time in the season. They're probably now out of the NFC South title race along with the NFC wildcard race, even if they're only a game out. I just don't see that happening now, going back to Taylor Heineke and where that team stands and the fact they lost to the 2-12 Carolina Panthers. The defense has played well. Offensively, they've started to run the football better, but there's still a lot to be desired as far as the passing game goes. But I did like Bryce Young able to complete 75% of his passes and put together a game-winning drive for the second time this season against the Falcons on Sunday afternoon. So I'm interested to see if he can stack good performances in back-to-back weeks and kind of see how he stacks up against a guy in Jordan Love, who I've seen bits and pieces of him. I saw the Kansas City game, which of course is controversial, the ending there, a little bit of the game against the Giants. I know the Packers lost that. How are fans feeling about Jordan Love? How's the organization feeling about Jordan Love through 14 games so far this season?
I think those are, of course, two different cohorts. And so we have to remember that what is happening in the fan base is very rarely what is happening inside the organization, right?
Sure.
This is just how this works. But interestingly, I say all that to say, I think it's in a very similar place. I think the confidence right now in Jordan Love is very high. And that when the season started, that was certainly not the case. And I'm not sure, frankly, Julian, it was the case in either cohort. Like, I don't know if the front office and the coaching staff were totally sold on Jordan Love. And certainly the fan base was not totally sold on Jordan Love. If you'd asked this fan base about Halloween, how they were feeling about Jordan Love, probably would not have been so great. That being said, one of our media friends, Jake Morley, over at Packer Report, does a poll every week. And the poll, it's on Twitter, and it's just is Jordan Love, yes, no. And so he's been tracking this is basically an approval rating, right? Right. Tracking the approval rating. And basically over the since Halloween, essentially, we're talking about 90+% of the votes on yes. And so part of that is because he's just been a different quarterback. Like, he's improved so much in the areas where you have to see quarterbacks improve. The deep ball was a big problem early on. He's now one of the most efficient and effective deep ball throwers in the league. From the clean pocket. That's one of those key stats. We talked about this yesterday on Locked On Packers. He was making mistakes from a clean pocket when it was good and there for him. This is something, by the way, I think Bryce Young already does pretty well, is from a clean pocket. Let's just find the guy and hit him and throw an accurate ball. All of a sudden, since week 9, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league from a clean pocket. And that was true once again on Sunday. The defense has just been such a mess. That has been such a huge problem for them.
Yeah.
It is one of those things. And if you go back to 2018, the Packers were having a forgettable season. That was Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers. They lose to Josh Rosen and the Arizona Cardinals, who were, I believe, winless at the time, or maybe had a 1 win. They looked absolutely atrocious. They end up getting Kyler Murray because they were the worst team in the league. Mike McCarthy got fired essentially because of losing that game and how they looked. This has the same sort of vibe with Joe Barry, where if they look bad again, and God forbid they lose this game, just from a Packers standpoint, I think you have to see changes made. And I do think, and I said this to our guest yesterday, Lily Zhao, if they lose to the Panthers, I don't think internally there will be pressure on Matt LaFleur, but I do think externally, I think the media will start to go, hey, wait a second. Like, this team 3 weeks ago would look like they were going to be a 10 or 11 win team, and now they're not even going to be a 500 team. What the hell happened? And it's not going to be the prettiest. I'm telling you that right now, Julian. And that's just one of those things. I don't mean to like drag the Panthers with that, but that's just the reality of the two teams right now. Like, it is the kind of game where if you're the Packers, you have to win it.
Oh, absolutely. Panthers are 2-12. They're not a good football team. We all understand that. And we've already seen what happened when you lose with the Falcons. Desmond Ridder, you throw one of the worst interceptions we're going to see all season long.
Ugh.
You lose your starting job again. It's as simple as that, man. The game was over. If they kick a field goal, I don't know if Carolina is going to get down the field and actually run out the clock like they did. There would have been a little bit more game pressure on them, of course, knowing that you had to score a touchdown, and the Panthers have not been very successful in doing that since Thomas Brown has been the play caller. Peter, we're talking about 6 games. This man has been the play caller here in Carolina in 5 touchdowns. 3 of those games, they did not score a touchdown. That includes the game on Sunday, which makes it all the more hilarious, knowing who the opponent was too, being Atlanta. The Panthers won that game without scoring a touchdown in those conditions. So yeah, if the Packers lose this game, I think it's only fair that someone probably loses their job, because that's what should happen when you lose to a team as bad as the Carolina Panthers. Now, the vibes have been good so far this week, so I'm not trying to obviously be negative at the Panthers, but you're right. It's just the reality. This is not a good football team.
Oh, they've been pretty bad in Green Bay, let me tell you.
And when you lose to a bad football team, bad things are likely to happen. But I want to talk about some of those matchups, because I did have a listener ask me about the Packers defense on my mailbag episode on Wednesday, and whether this could be a breakout game for Bryce Young. I looked at some of the numbers. It's possible, but I am concerned about one matchup in particular. So look at some of the matchups, some of the key players in this Christmas Eve showdown between the 2-12 Panthers.
Sell it. I love it. Sell it.
In 8 Packers here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Packers. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Last week, I told Falcon fans to go ahead, put down that $5, and you'll get your money. Didn't happen. Packer fans, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to make that risk? The Panthers are hot. Never know. But not really. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The NFL playoff picture is heating up. Got the NBA going on, men's and women's college basketball, the NHL. If that's your thing, you got the college bowl season. Are there too many bowl games? Not if you're a betting man. There's not enough bowl games. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season, which we kicked off 16 weeks ago. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Back here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Packers. It's yet another Locked On NFL crossover Thursday presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. Julian Council here with you, the host of Locked On Panthers, joined by Peter Bukowski, the host of Locked On Packers, breaking down this NFC matchup on Christmas Eve. And the last time there was a Christmas Eve game here at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte a year ago, the Panthers did face off against an NFC North opponent in the Detroit Lions, and the Carolina Panthers, who had a struggling offense last year like they do now, had the highest total yardage output in franchise history. Could that be a repeat on Sunday afternoon? If it does, then your friend Barry may no longer have a job there in Green Bay. Peter, let's look at some of the matchups and some of the players heading into this game on Sunday. What matchup are you in particular looking at from the Packers' perspective on Sunday afternoon in this game?
Yeah, it would not be a very Merry Christmas if that were to happen. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. No, the thing that I'm watching here is the Packers with their defense, of course. It was absolutely shredded by Baker Mayfield. One of the worst performances you will see all season by a defense, just by alignment. Like, forget execution, just by you have a call that makes no sense for the circumstance. You have a philosophy that makes no sense for the circumstance. On 3rd and 3, you're playing quarters with corners at 6 and 7 yard depth, bailing. Like, why? For what? This was the most damning stat for me, Julian. Chris Godwin, 12 targets, 10 catches, right? Chris Godwin's a good player. Like that, Chris Godwin eats you up. It's not a big deal, right? Average separation in the game, this is next gen stats, was over 4 yards. Over 4 yards. With an average depth of target at 8 yards. That is actually impossible. Like, the math doesn't math on that. And the reason is the average cushion that he was being given was over 7 yards. That's just free access. That's just free money. Like, you can't down in and down out be throwing short and still having your corners play at depth. It just doesn't make sense. And it's pretty frustrating watching. I like don't generally get mad at stuff because I'm just sort of like, why? This just, as a football fan, like, take the Packers part of this out of it. If, like, when I see the Chargers doing it, it bugs me too. The Brandon Staley stuff was just like nuts. I just don't understand the plan. I don't understand the plan. And as you said, like, this is a potential get right game for Bryce Young, just because this defense has been so porous the last few weeks. Like, you can say Bryce Young has been, below expectation. You can say, the playmakers stink. By the way, the playmakers stink. But, like, that was true in New York, and they couldn't stop Tommy DeVito. So you don't have a lot of faith right now. This defense is built to stop Patrick Mahomes. And guess what? The Packers did a pretty decent job stopping Patrick Mahomes. They got run on by Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, they won the game.
And they won because the offense played well.
Yes.
This defense doing what they did the last 2 weeks again has to be the biggest concern that I have from a Packers standpoint. I want to get into the matchups part of this by sort of flipping this around, because the Packers decided they were going to go all young, first and second year pass catchers exclusively on this team. And it's worked. It's worked. This is a top 10 offense by EPA per play, 11th, I believe, by DVOA. They've been a good, not just like an above average offense, a good offense this season with all of those young guys. What have you made of the approach that the Panthers took, going a little bit more with some veterans, like Adam Thielen being the top target getter on this team? DJ Chark, you bring him in. Like, was that, in retrospect, the way to go with this team?
I had to go back and listen to what I said back on March 10th when the Panthers made that trade up to number 1 and sent DJ Moore to the Bears. I didn't want to come back on here and tell people something that I didn't actually say. So going back and listening to it, I was not a fan of the move to send DJ Moore. And having gone through this season, I'm still not a fan of sending DJ Moore to the Bears, while also understanding, because context is important, that deal does not get done without DJ Moore being a part of it, because the Bears wanted to pair their young rookie, well, not rookie quarterback, their quarterback on a rookie salary,
plays like a rookie,
with a top tier wide receiver. And because that's what you do. You want to see whether you have the right guy. And the best way to do it is to put weapons around him. And of course, the Carolina Panthers have not done that with Bryce Young. Now, I also said at the time too, like, let's give it a week to see where the world's at after kind of the first round of free agency, to see who the Carolina Panthers had brought in. And by that point in time, they had brought in Adam Thielen, which has worked out wonders, especially considering the expectation. And I felt like at age 33, and I always feel gross saying this because I'm only 30, at age 33, this is about as good as you would expect out of Adam Thielen. I thought he could give you something. My concern is at age 34, which he'll be here again next year, what are you getting out of Adam Thielen and what's around Adam Thielen at wide receiver? Because he can't be your pseudo number 1 for 2 years in a row. And then they also brought in Hayden Hurst, who's now out for the season with concussion issues. And God bless him, because what he's talking about seems to be pretty serious. But he did not really fulfill that pass-catching tight end role that we thought was going to happen here in Carolina, especially in that Frank Reich offense that has loved to utilize the tight end in the past, and even marrying the concepts that Thomas Brown was bringing over from LA, where we've seen tight ends have success in a McVay offense. So looking at it on paper, you could see maybe more options when you factor in those guys, bringing in DJ Chark, Miles Sanders, who it's been a while since he actually was a threat out of the backfield in the passing game. But there felt like there's more options than there were at the end of the 2022 season, when it was just DJ Moore and then sometimes Terrace Marshall, who has been a healthy scratch for 5 weeks in a row here in Carolina, former second-round pick in 2021. So, yes, in hindsight, it wasn't great. And even when it played out, didn't seem great. Now what the Carolina Panthers have to do, obviously, is they have to find someone to put in that wide receiver room, along with Jonathan Mingo, who's had his moments the last couple of weeks, the second-round rookie out of Ole Miss,
kid,
Adam Thielen, but they got to find a number 1. I just found it comical when the trade deadline was coming up and there was reports about, the Panthers want to acquire a number 1 receiver. Who the hell is sending you a number 1 receiver in October?
And also they had one. Remember, they had one.
Right, you had one. And the problem really is that they did this in a very poor wide receiver market, and people can go back and say, oh, why didn't they go get DeAndre Hopkins? And well, I mean, Hopkins has been fine. It's not like he's been does he really change that much for the Carolina Panthers this season? I don't think so. And then seeing what he got from Tennessee, Carolina wasn't going to spend that kind of money. They wouldn't even spend that kind of money on Leonard Floyd, who could have helped them out in the pass rush, as they instead brought in Justin Houston, who asked for his release after totaling a grand total of a half a sack this season. So the Panthers weren't really trying to be big spenders in the first place. I appreciated a lot of the deals weren't that much that you could get out of them after a year, maybe two. But of course, they got to find a number one, and it's probably going to have to be free agency, maybe targeting a guy like T. Higgins, if you truly believe he's number one, right? Michael Pittman, but it's going to probably cost them, because I don't think Indianapolis or Cincinnati are letting those guys go for free. They would be dumb to do it, but I don't think it's going to happen. So it's going to be difficult to see how they build this team. And before you even get there, who's going to be the general manager? Is it going to be Scott Fitterer still? He's been given no assurances that he's going to be back next season. My whole thing is, okay, well, you got 3 games left in the season. You fired Frank Reich 3 weeks ago. What exactly is going to change the next 3 weeks that's going to magically change David Tepper's mind about keeping Scott Fitterer around? If he was going to be gone, why wasn't he gone 3 weeks ago? Why is he still here right now? So to me, it feels like he's going to be sticking around here in Carolina, which I don't know if that's the best decision, but it's been a collaborative process throughout the roster building. Reich, there's players that he wanted, like DJ Chark, who had a great catch on Sunday to help them win the game, but has been obviously not good for Carolina. There's players that Ajero Avero, the DC, wanted, namely DJ Johnson, the player that they trade up in the 3rd round to get as an edge rusher, and he's given them absolutely nothing so far as a 25-year-old project at edge rusher. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting offseason, Peter, to figure out what this team's going to do.
And it's hard too, right? Because, you know, the Packers were able to leverage multiple 2nd-round picks into Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave, and they've been huge for them. But also like Tucker Kraft, Dontavian Wicks, Malik Heath, like they found a multitude of players. When you trade half your draft away to get Bryce Young, it's hard then to supplement with other young pieces. What they needed was Terrace Marshall to be better than he's been. They needed Tommy Tremble to become more. I mean, he's a nice player, but like more of a difference maker than he's become. He's someone that I'm pretty sure, based on what I've been told, that the Packers were pretty into in terms of what he could be for this offense. The other thing that I am looking at in terms of opportunities to exploit matchups, this Panthers passing defense has been pretty solid, right? Like middle of the pack in terms of DVOA, EPA per play. Like that's on a team that overall stinks in terms of like record and overall stats. That's good, right? Like that's doing something nice.
Oh yeah, defensively they've been
run defense, Julian. Like there are 2 teams allowing positive EPAs per rush. Like rushing is generally not a positive EPA per play. 2 teams, and the Panthers are twice as worse as the 31st team in rush EPA. Like that's pretty bad. So how are they finding that balance? What's working and then what is not? Because I feel like teams that have not been able to stop the Packers ground attack have really struggled, because then they get into the play action game and they have cooked people with the play action game.
Well, we've seen the last couple of weeks they've had success stopping the run. New Orleans did not do very much on them 2 weeks ago, and then you look at the game on Sunday where you knew.
Well, New Orleans can't run on anybody, but it's better when you do it against Atlanta. Then you start to say, okay, that's nice.
Oh yeah, and in Atlanta, when the rushing against Carolina only had 1.7 yards per carry. The Panthers run game has been better the last couple of weeks. And I got some of those stats that I actually want to get to here shortly when we talk about kind of what must go right. But they defensively, Derek Brown's been awesome. Brian Burns has statistically not been as impressive as he was a year ago. But you look at the other guys in his position group at edge rusher, he has been miles better than any of all of them combined. So the defense, they're great when it comes to total yardage allowed, not great in the red zone, don't get takeaways. They got 2 last week, and that was the difference in the game. And it'll be interesting to see what they're able to do that again on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. But let's get into more of the game here on the other side. We'll look at what needs to go right for the Packers, other than the fact they need a win so they can stay in the NFC playoff race, and what needs to go right for the Carolina Panthers, who, let's just play spoiler again for the 2nd week in a row. We'll talk about that here on this Locked On NFL crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Packers next. Whenever the game clock stops, that's time to order in with DoorDash. Order pizza, wings, soda, burgers, or even just buns on DoorDash and get it all delivered without missing the game. Score football season's best deals on groceries, restaurants, retail, and more. All of your favorite restaurants and stores from retail to grocery are on the app, so you can shop everything you need to get game day ready. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash to get ready to watch your team win. That is if you're a Packers fan, really a fan of any team that's not named the Carolina Panthers this season. And I love a lot of spots here in Charlotte locally that use DoorDash. Got Hawthorne Pizza nearby. Go there all the time. Got Yafo. Been hit up Mama Ricotta's a ton recently. You guys can also do that by going to DoorDash. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23, subject to change. Terms apply. That's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. Again, subject change. Terms apply. All right, Peter, we're almost there. We're almost to Sunday, Christmas Eve. The big day is coming up on Monday for some.
Marquee matchup.
Cannot wait. Hey, the Panthers, they might be 2-12, but you cannot tell the story of the NFL season and the NFC playoff picture without talking about the Carolina Panthers. They've already got one victim. That was the Atlanta Falcons last Sunday. Do they get a second victim this week? Do they get one again next week against Jacksonville? And then week 18, I've talked about this. Got Baker Mayfield coming to town. We know how things played out with him last year. I have no really ill thoughts about Baker. I've loved Baker since he was a true freshman walk-on at Texas Tech. I don't think he's been the best situation last year to succeed. I'm honestly happy to see him have success against the Packers on Sunday. I don't have any hate towards the Packers either. But you cannot have Baker Mayfield come here week 18 and hoist, which is not even a real thing, the NFC title. Or the NFC South division title. So we'll see how that plays out. But a big, colossal, monstrous matchup really for the Green Bay Packers on Sunday in a game that they cannot lose. So what, Peter, must go right for the Packers to avoid losing 3 straight games?
Well, we don't have a expletive button on here, so I'm going to use a different word than I was going to say. But they can't pee the bed defensively like that. It just has to be baseline normal average defense, even be a little below average. And I just don't think Carolina can score enough points because I do think Green Bay is going to be able to run the ball. Aaron Jones back healthy. We'll see what AJ Dillon's status is. He's got a broken thumb, and that makes it really hard to carry the ball. Was not able to go last week because of that. Emmanuel Wilson, who's their third string running back, back at practice yesterday. So that could be a potential boost. He's a really intriguing UDFA running back that they brought in. He's got some real juice. Really, really nifty player in the open field. I think the Packers are going to be able to score more than like 14, 17 points. I don't think they're going to score 30. And I think that if you have any level of pride, if you believe yourself to be a playoff team, you forget Joe Barry, just go play better. And I think for the Packers defense, that has to be the mantra this week. Like, forget the noise, forget everything, go beat a bad Panthers team and figure out what comes next. And that's the plan to me. So I think if the defense is just kind of meh, if they're not the story of the game, then I think the Packers win. And because I think the offense is going to be fine.
I love it. If you have any level of pride, you go out there and you beat a bad Panthers team. And honestly, you're right. Because that's where you kind of do get to the point of the season where, okay, you're 6-8. You lost to a Giants team that's not very good. Tommy DeVito, right. I guess it's a fun story. I watched his career back at Syracuse and at Illinois. At no point have I ever been impressed by Tommy DeVito. The only thing that's been impressive so far is the fact that he's actually playing in the NFL, that he's starting NFL games. And I know it's due to injury, but that he's even in position to start NFL games. So good for him.
The jawline's pretty good too. He's a good looking guy, I have to say.
He's not my type, but sure. But yeah, no, I mean, Tommy DeVito, like that happening. And then the Baker Mayfield perfect passer rating. Was it only the second quarterback to ever do that? Lambeau Field, and the other one's Aaron Rodgers, who we know is going to have
the first visiting QB ever.
Oh my God! So maybe put Baker in a Hall of Fame.
Not Peyton Manning, not Tom Brady, not Dan Marino,
Eli. All those years. That's
Baker Mayfield.
I guess not even all those years, but still.
Panthers legend Baker Mayfield.
Yes, for like 7 games. God bless you, Baker. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. I think for the Panthers, it's funny like doing these things. It's pretty basic stuff. You don't turn the football over. You got to protect your quarterback. And I was looking at some of the numbers, looking at Pro Football Reference, and the Packers are 7th in pressure percentage this season. They're 8th in quarterback knockdown percentage and 6th in quarterback hurry percentage. The Panthers offensive line has been in shambles all season long. I think in large part because of, the injuries. They have played 6 different left guards and 8 different right guards this season. Wow. Cade Mays, who they drafted in the 6th round last year out of Tennessee, will be starting at left guard. Then Gabe Jackson, who came in the 3rd quarter to replace a UDFA in Nash Jensen out of North Dakota State. Gabe Jackson, longtime veteran, he'll probably be out there at right guard. So there's your 13th different guard combination of the season here in Carolina. That doesn't help Bradley Bozeman, the center, because he's playing next to different guys every single week and different guys throughout the game. Taylor Moton, he's been solid. He has been the only stalwart on the offensive line for 5+ years here in Carolina. If they had 5 of Taylor Moton's, they would be fine. There would not be any conversations about potentially moving Ike Ekwonu, the left tackle, into guard. And I tell fans, it's not just that simple, because everybody that's on your starting offensive line coming into the season this year is under contract next year. And a couple of those guys, looking at the way they've restructured the deals, you can't really get rid of them. So you're going to have to just figure it out. And part of the reason they've had a problem too has just been the scheme when it comes to more of a wide zone run scheme. Last year, when they turned the season around, running the ball well under Steve Wilkes and being 6-6 and close to being the NFC South champions, they just went downhill. And Bradley Bozeman has been quoted to say that's what he's more comfortable in doing. And he was quoted in that story from Joe Person and Diana Rossini from The Athletic a couple weeks ago, really shedding a light into all the mess here in Carolina. So they've been kind of doing the whole square hole, round peg kind of deal here in Carolina, or if it's vice versa, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. It hasn't worked out so far this season, but they have run the ball well the last couple of weeks. Now, the Packers do not have a great run defense so far this season. Looking at it, they're 3rd worst in run defense in the league. They're 4th worst in yards per attempt. Not great. The Panthers, the last 3 weeks, have averaged 155 yards on the ground, which is 4th most during that time. And they've really dedicated themselves to running the ball. And all this happens after they remove Frank Reich as a play caller and a head coach. And they have had 36 attempts per game the last 3 games, which is 2nd most during that period of time in the NFL. So protecting Bryce against what has been a fairly solid pass rush and be able to run the football and take some pressure off of him, that is the way the Carolina Panthers can win this game. And I brought up before, last year, they played an NFC North team at home on Christmas Eve, and they ran all over them. I'm looking at an NFC team from the North as well, and the Packers, who is susceptible to giving up some big run plays and has struggled defensively. I don't think the Panthers are going to win this game with Bryce Young throwing for 250+, which would be awesome. I think they have to win the game by running the ball for over 200 yards again on Sunday afternoon.
4 times this Packers defense has given them 200 yards rushing. No team has done it more than twice except them. So if there's a week for it, this is going to be the week. And remember, it was that rushing game in particular against Detroit. They dominated that line of scrimmage. And that was when going into that week 18 matchup, I was saying all week on Locked On Packers, I was like, you can bully this Lions front. And then, of course, the Packers didn't do that. So I think the Packers are going to win. I've got it I think 24-17 is a reasonable thing, because I don't think the defense is going to be great, but 17 is a lot of points for the Panthers to score. And so I think that's the defense performing average to below average, and Green Bay gets a chance to get the win as a result. I don't think it's going to be it could certainly be 31-17, but I think more likely we're looking at a close-ish game. The Panthers play with a little bit of pride. The Packers trying to figure things out, but need this game so much more. And I think late in the season, sometimes urgency is really the only difference you need. I also think there's a pretty clear talent discrepancy here. So that's where I am. And we'll be live after the game to talk about it on YouTube. The Locked On Packers YouTube. Go subscribe. Would love you to do that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree at all. I think this is a game the Packers absolutely should win and probably will win. I know the line, looking at FanDuel, is at 5, a favor of the Packers here on the road.
Opened at 5.5, so gone down.
And also knowing that Packer fans travel, we've seen what it's looked like in the stands here in Carolina. Maybe in the stocking. The people are going to find some tickets that are Panther fans to go to the game on Sunday. I don't know if there's going to be enough of them to be able to nullify the amount of Packer fans that will be in the stands on Sunday. So it's going to be probably a pseudo home game for Green Bay, which I'm sure the Packers are pretty used to across the NFL, but especially coming down here to Carolina, look at the state of the franchise and where the fan base is at. And it's not a criticism of the fan base. David Tepper, this is your fault. This is your doing. And well, until you fix it, this is just going to be the reality. But yeah, I think Green Bay will win this game. The Panthers defensively, they can keep them in it. They've done it the last couple of weeks. New Orleans only had 207 yards total. Atlanta had 204 total. I think the Packers probably have more than that. The Panthers defense have shown that they can keep the offense in the game. The offense just has to do something to take it and go out there and actually win the game. But I think Green Bay probably wins. But I could see the Panthers maybe losing this game by 4, maybe a field goal. So we'll see how it goes on Sunday afternoon. But it's going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Packers, presented by our friends over at Pride Picks, our Locked On NFL Crossover Thursday partner. I'm Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers. Follow me on Twitter at Julian Council. He is Peter Bukowski, the host of Locked On Packers. Follow him on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski. And check us out live on YouTube after the game, respectively, on Locked On Panthers YouTube channel and the Locked On Packers YouTube channel. But in the meantime, y'all, be safe, be happy, be whole. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you on Christmas Eve.
All right, back tomorrow on a Friday before a Christmas Eve game. Packers, Panthers, a marquee matchup. I can't even get through it. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live, like we will be on Sunday after the game, go subscribe to us on our YouTube page so you can stay Locked On Packers.